Excalibur is a 1982 retelling of the Arthurian legend, directed by John Boorman. It stars Nigel Terry, Helen Mirren, Nicholas Clay, as well as some minor stars who you might recognize, such as Liam Neeson and Patrick Stewart. Obviously 30, 40 years younger, still super bald, still recognizably Captain Picard. It also, as a Game of Thrones connection, stars Ciaran Hinds. I hope I pronounced this guy Mance Rayder. If you don't you don't recognize him from the name alone, who has a very minor role as a guy named Lot, who I think you might blink and miss it. Mm-hmm. If you've gone past the scene where Arthur's holding a sword to some dude's throat in a river, you've already gone too far. But he's in there too. Lots and lots of, oh yeah, that guy from British filmmaking, and Irish filmmaking, and Scottish filmmaking are kind of got their starts in this movie. Jim, what did you think of Excalibur?
I think Excalibur is of its time, very much so. It came off to me as feeling pretty dated. The film feels dated. It looks muddy. This HD conversion that we got, it didn't seem like they remastered it at all. They simply upscaled it and shit it out. The editing, you can tell, was done before the age of computer editing, where they were just slicing up film. And it shows in some clunky edits. Ultimately, I think the story hangs together pretty well, although I found myself at times confused, especially when dealing with Merlin. And some of the scenes he had with Morgana, I don't know how you say that. But overall, I think I enjoyed it. Some of the stuff that does hold together are the battle scenes. I think that there's a lot of pretty good action if you can ignore, like, some obvious squibs and weird choreography and stuff. But for the most part, it holds together. And then I felt like some of the actors they chose did really well. Like the guy who plays Arthur showed a shocking amount of range, in my opinion, from boy squire all the way up to old man seasoned King Arthur. He does a great job. It's funny because like this is the Conan kind of took us through that arc too, young and all the way to old man sitting on the throne, and we got another movie of that vein. It's so funny because this the guy that got to play Merlin, which is, I think, Nicholas, that wasn't it. It's Nicol Williamson. He was described in an article I read as the greatest actor since Marlon Brando. He was described in the late 70s that way. Whoa. And I felt like he made a lot of wrong choices. Oh, yeah.
Its scales glisten in the bark of trees. Its roar is heard in the wind. And its forked tongue strikes like... Oh, like lightning. Yes, that's it.
Who's that guy that does the actor studio? James Lipton? It felt like him doing Merlin at some points, because he just, like, whenever he felt way too pleased with himself in situations where it seemed like maybe he shouldn't be, and just like very campy, very stagey performance.
Yeah, the across the board, I think everybody's kind of stagey, but the Merlin really stood out.
Right, but when you see like a fairly naturalist performance from like the Arthur guy, but I mean, I could also get in his head and be like, well, I'm Merlin. I'm like this ancient being that may be living backwards in time and goes and sleeps through the years in my crystal cave. Like, this guy shouldn't be recognizably human.
Look into the eyes of the dragon and despair.
I also read that John Boorman was going for mythological truth rather than historical truth, and boy howdy, none of this style of armor or castle work or dress or grooming even tries to be something approaching accurate for what this like. This is supposed to be set in the Dark Ages, but yet they're all wearing like this full plate mail, like it's like the very like almost Enlightenment time, and they're just but they're trying to, and I don't know, because that's another thing that's very hard for me to interface with, because I felt like we kind of came of age during the age where people are like, you know what, we actually want to sweat the details. We actually want to hire a historian to go through and make, because like the more things that are more specific or feel more real. They make things funnier, they make things sadder, they make things more heroic. So like, you know, I cut my teeth on like Kevin Costner's Robin Hood, which you can say a lot of shit about, but like they sweated details on costuming, and even Lord of the Rings, where like they're trying to like take this fantastical armor and root it in real life civilizations and cultures, so it feels real. You know, it just doesn't feel costume. And when you see the productions that don't, like we just watched Season of the Witch, where it's like obviously no one gave a fuck about any kind of accuracy, and it feels jarring that even in a silly project with witches and demons that like didn't, like, this armor looks ridiculous. So to me, that stuff reads as like camp or lazy, but I don't think that's not a correct way to interpret this work.
That's fair, but I think look, Mr. Borman,
right?
There's a way to do both, and I don't want to throw too much shade because this is 1981, but 4 years before that, Star Wars kind of did both, right? They sweated a lot of those details when it came down to costuming, when it came down to the world building and stuff, and they also told this Arthurian legend, which, can I just say, I am not up on my Arthurian legend. I know I've had like 1,500 years or something to get up on it, but I'm not. And so at every turn in this plot, I was looking, oh my God, there's Star Wars. There's Star Wars. That's Star Wars. I feel like, you know, Lucas nailed that part of it, telling that big, broad, mythical story while also incorporating a little bit of attention to detail.
I had a friend in art class who was like a teenage film buff. And it probably, if I was still in touch with him, it would probably eat at his soul that I'm like some kind of critic, and that his unwashed Philistine friend is some kind of pop culture critic, and I don't know what he's doing nowadays. But his favorite thing to do is, like, I would come in and be excited about something that I'd seen, and he'd be like, you know, oh, you like a Gladiator? I liked the first time when I saw Spartacus. And then I go watch Spartacus, and I'm like, all right, well, I like Gladiator better, but I can understand. I see what you mean. And I remember this was like a conversation that, like, I was talking about First Night, which First Night is like even further. Like, First Night, they're essentially wearing street clothes that have like a shiny like pauldron, like a single shield shaped thing, and they got a shiny helmet on, and that's like, they don't even give a fuck. This is almost Shakespeare in the Park level of production. And he's like, oh, I like it better the first time when it's Excalibur, and it's, you know, and it's got like real, you know, it's R, it's not PG-13 and all that. So I watched Excalibur as like a 17-year-old, and it was tough sledding, but, you know, Patrick Stewart got me by, and like some of the nudity got me by. But so I feel like this going for this mythological correctness out of history, it kind of bothers me, because I now associate that stuff as kind of like camp and amateur, or not serious, or lazy, or and so yeah, and there's some rough stuff, like when Arthur builds his castle, I swear to God, it looks like it's built out of blocks of recycled aluminum. He took 10,000 beer cans, melted them down, and that's one brick that's in.
It's all the armor of the knights he slayed in order to take the kingdom. He just melted it down into a castle.
It's like the Iron Throne. This is the aluminum castle, and it just looks cheap
silly
and weird. But it's so weird because you like the round table itself looks amazing.
Yeah,
and while the armor is anachronistic, it is real. Like it looks real. So I don't know, and this gets me back to the look of Merlin. Like, I think Merlin looks really cool. He's got that long flowing dark robe. He's got this weird steel skull cap.
Yeah, what's up with that?
I think it just makes him look borderline sinister and evil, which I think you're supposed to understand that Merlin is doing some kind of eugenics program to bring about a perfect leader to unite this tribe of barely civilized barbarians into an actual nation. You know, they don't ever.
Oh yeah.
You know, they don't actually talk about the British Isles as such, but it's the land. It feels very much like when you're watching like Hero, that Jet Li thing, where they're taught, you know, like you don't know what country it's from, but it's actually China. Like they're just talking about things about the land and the people, and because it's supposed to be universal.
Gotcha.
But like I said, and I also felt like this film comes across very much like the David Lynch adaptation of Dune, where the more familiar you are with like the Arthurian legend, the more you get out of it, the more like, oh, okay, I see what they're alluding to. Because if you don't know anything about the Merlin legend, I don't like when Helen Mirren comes down there and traps him in like a fucking piece of quartz.
You fool.
You're like, what the actual fuck even happened?
Number one confusing scene for me in the entire movie.
Yeah.
I don't know why it happened. The what is pretty obvious. Like, look, she tricked him somehow, and he ended up encased in carbonite.
Right.
But I don't know why it happened. Like, I know Morgana is Arthur's sister, and she seems to want some kind of revenge, or at least to learn magic from Merlin, and he won't teach her.
Yeah.
But I don't know why the things that were happening in that scene were actually happening.
Yeah, and you're also like later in the movie, it almost feels like Merlin intended that to happen.
Maybe he wanted to be a Force ghost
so
he could help out Arthur.
Because if he didn't intend to happen, then he just got tricked.
Yeah.
And it was like dumb luck and her own vanity that did her in, which also might be like he's going for something that's mythologically true. Like, obviously, none of this is historically true. I mean, obviously, you can take just the Guinevere, Lancelot, Arthur love triangle and blow it up into a 2-hour movie. That's what they did in First Night. Here, this is like a kind of like a 20-minute sequence, and it's a long. And this is also very much influenced the. Is it Sam O'Neill, the guy who did the
Jurassic Park guy?
Yeah. That did the Merlin adaptation. I mean, this is that's only 4 hours long. And I also read that John Boorman intended this to be a 3-hour-long movie, and they didn't actually film it, but they cut it down to like a 2-hour-ish. And it did feel like there's massive chunks of connective tissue, because you just can't tell the entire, Uther Pendragon to Mordred storyline in 2 hours and 15 minutes.
No, this
movie
movie
do a good job of it.
Yeah, the movie felt like it was moving. Like,
Yes.
I would get scenes that were there, purely utilitarian scenes that needed to move you from plot to plot to plot. And like, honestly, coming off of Army of Darkness, I was shocked at how much was going on in this movie, because Army of Darkness has almost no plot.
Right.
This one has more plot than you can possibly fit into a single movie.
Right.
And it kind of suffers for that. They move too quickly, but out of necessity for the story they're trying to tell. I think there's a lot of, like you mentioned, the Guinevere, Arthur, Lancelot love triangle. And I think that's maybe the most developed stuff in the entire film, aside from maybe the character of Arthur himself.
Yeah.
And they do things that I associate with, good filmmaking, like foreshadowing, right?
Yeah.
They have scenes that are kind of placed, 15 minutes before the actual love triangle develops, where Guinevere kind of gets a look from Lancelot, and she doesn't know what to make of it. And then, she's riding to Camelot, being escorted by Lancelot, and there's a little bit of flirting there. And then later, much later in the movie, it kind of unfolds. And then even down to like Arthur coming to terms with it as an old man,
Yeah.
when he gets Excalibur back.
Well, that's the other thing is like,
and that stuff's good. That stuff works to me.
it does work. I think there's a couple bumps in the road, because like when Lancelot comes in at the end,
The crazy
shock of white dude afro, just like 3 feet long, and he's fighting like he looks much more like a Gandalf type of figure, especially when Arthur's drank the Grail, and now he's like a man 20 years younger.
Yeah,
it felt I'm like, this doesn't look like Lancelot. And I got confused a lot of times too, like when Lancelot was defending Guinevere's honor. Him and Liam Neeson's armor was so similar that I actually lost the plot. Like, is this a plot? Is Lancelot as good as he is? He can't fight with a sword through his hip? Because I'm like, God, I'm kind of surprised Lancelot's just getting beat down like this. But then it's like, oh, I got confused. This is Liam Neeson getting beat down.
Yeah,
and this is why Hollywood actors never wear their helmets in battle scenes, because you put these dudes in even a hulking beast like Liam Neeson is hard to tell from this kind of slender built British guy when they're all wearing these giant tin can armor. But I found it like it was easy for me to get lost because, like, Liam Neeson, before he stood up and accused Lancelot of cheating on the king, of cuckolding the king, he had not a single line of dialogue.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
suddenly he stands up and he's like, "You're supposed okay. This guy is a knight of the Round Table, and he is." He's saying what everybody else is thinking, but there were those little connective scenes where we needed a scene of like the knights talking amongst themselves about where's Lancelot. Well, I've heard he's stooping the queen, and then a skeptical Liam Neeson scowls, but then he starts noticing their smiles and their flirtations, and then Lancelot disappears, and that means. None of that happened. So just Liam Neeson stands up drunkenly and says, "The queen's fucking Lancelot," and now there's a battle happening, and then he loses. And what did the I don't know. It needed. I feel like they should have picked the acts of this. God, I feel like this is what we say every fucking movie. But they should have taken the individual acts and made them into movies, or got rid of the Uther. Because here's the thing: what did they get by going back to Uther Pendragon? The fact that like lust and love can undo a good man, a bad man, doesn't really matter. Like,
it seems like it. There's some kind of echoes that they're doing with these magic babies, I guess.
Yeah.
I didn't think too much about it. I was distracted by some of the filmmaking stuff in this.
That is that interesting that like a guy like Uther Pendragon, who's this warlord and he's this lusty, bloodlust, lust, all this kind of lust. He squanders a chance to reunite the land because he just wants one night with this woman. And then they produce this perfect king, Arthur. And then Arthur is brought down by the opposite. Well, not the opposite of lust, but I guess the perfected form of lust, like love, which is something that he's also used to kind of like knit his kingdom together. Like I thought that was one thing effective is when Arthur became king and he had to get these men's loyalty, like that that scene where he's knighted by that guy felt like a seduction a bit, like a romance, like when you see a man get down on his knee and profess his like his love and devotion to a concept or thing to another man. It does feel like he's being proposed to, right?
Sure. Yeah.
Like
visually at least.
But I felt like that's kind of what they're trying for, but I don't know that, like, I honestly, I think that the love triangle is so universal a story, it doesn't need another layer of, like, irony. Like, look, this lustful beast can give birth to a perfect king who can give birth to a lustful beast. AKA read 1st and 2nd Kings in the Bible. Like, that's, or watch Game of Thrones. Do like, that's... I don't know. I feel like there's 20 minutes of the movie they could have gotten back and given to other parts of the movie time to breathe.
No, for sure. I think if I'm being generous, what they're trying to do is show that Merlin has kind of tried and failed a few times with this whole thing. And they get at that when Arthur starts doing things that Merlin doesn't foresee in his visions of the future. And I think Uther is kind of representative of that too. He wanted Uther to be the guy who would unite all the kingdoms, and then that didn't happen. Uther got lusty. Uther got horny, and then he had to make Arthur to hopefully carry that forward. And then Arthur starts doing things that he doesn't foresee, and he's like, "Uh-oh, you broke the sword. Oh shit, you threw it in the lake."
Right.
I didn't see any of this coming.
But it's pleasant surprises. Like things
it all worked out, yeah. But it surprised Merlin.
Yeah, because that's the other thing is I thought that they were going when he lost his mind attacking Lancelot. I was like, man, this is so weird because I know how this ends up, and I'm trying to see like how like Arthur going fucking full bloodlust and crazy over this guy, thinking he kills him, and then how is this actually going to serve the plot? And I don't think it does. I think it feels like because ultimately this movie is about Arthur getting perspective and grace on a situation. Like, Lancelot and Guinevere loved each other, and I stood like the office of king essentially stood in the way of, and why would something like that happen? Like, this is obviously Lancelot's this incorruptible, upright guy, and I love Guinevere and they all love me. Like, it's I don't know, it's a weird kind of way to back into an open relationship.
Yeah, I think it taught Arthur something about himself and his wielding of power. You know, he just kind of lost his head in that moment. And he uses that opportunity. He gets lucky in that the sword is reformed and put back in his hand by the Lady of the Lake, but it taught him that he can't afford those sort of slip-ups. It taught him that he can't be selfish. He can't give in to his worst tendencies if he's actually going to do the thing that he's destined to do.
Right.
So I guess there's a little bit of learning on Arthur's part from from the non-love triangle aspect, from more of like a leadership perspective.
But then the time when the love triangle bit him in the ass, I guess what's interesting about that is that he had essentially set out what he did. Like the kingdom has tons of peace and prosperity, and now he's sitting there with a table full of warriors who
have nothing to do
but like whore and drink, and start lies and rumors. And it's kind of like, what do you do? What's the disease of more? Like, hey, there has to be another land to conquer. It has to, like, not being content in yourself. So he forgot that lesson he learned, but it wasn't in a moment of testing. It was in a moment of plenty and triumph.
Yeah.
And there's like, I don't know. I guess this is a how to fail spectacularly in leadership and politics in the multiple ways it can be done kind of movie.
The obvious takeaway from this story, because like I said early on, I have never actually read the Arthurian legend or looked at it in any significant way.
What is the Arthurian legend? Because
it's the
there's
monomyth,
so many, but there's so many different flavors of that.
There are, right. And like the Arthurian legend, as I understand it now, after reading a little bit about it, is that it evolved over many centuries.
Yes.
The French had a hand in it. The English, like everybody's kind of got their hands in this Arthurian legend and has made it larger than life, which it is. But yeah, then I looked at it from, I said, well, this is so much like Star Wars, which is, that monomyth, hero's journey thing, the Campbellian.
This is like the OG.
Right. Yeah. I mean, this is one of the prime examples of it, the Arthurian legend, that I just never knew about. And so it was interesting to look at it through that lens and sort of say, well, one of my favorite franchises of all times, my favorite stories of all time, is basically this story.
Yeah.
And it was just surprising.
Yeah, especially since you can see like Lucas's desire in the prequels to take it back to even more so. The Anakin is this kind of like genetic experiment to make a perfect, to generate a being that would bring balance to the Force. And like if Star Wars was almost Arthurian, by the time the prequels roll around, it's like explicitly so.
I mean, Luke Skywalker is King Arthur.
Yeah.
I mean, almost to the letter. Like the journey that he goes on is almost identical. Yeah,
like Anakin conceding his Uther Pendragon and Luke is King Arthur. There is a love triangle, but it turns out that's solved neatly by one of them being brothers and sisters. One leg collapsing under the weight of incest. Star Wars comes out in 2019 on HBO. Leia and Luke just banging.
Star Wars After Dark.
And Han Solo is a Brienne figure that might split up the love affair.
The other part of this movie that I like, because this movie is sort of three chunks with Uther, Arthur, and then Percival, who's kind of the other main character here, and they do a little bit of setting up of that character with the the battle between Lancelot and, is it Gawain? Is that his name?
Gawain.
Liam Neeson's knight character. He steps in to kind of volunteer to defend the Queen's honor, which sort of shows what kind of person he is. And I feel like you needed that scene in order for us to care about Percival later and understand who he is and why he'd go on this quest for Arthur. And I think that last half is probably the best half, or the best part of the movie for me. Where Percival's on this quest and he kind of gets into this very trippy scenario where he's questing for the Grail. He's found the Grail, but Morgana is defending it with her magic, and he's seeing all sorts of hallucinations, and he has to come to an understanding of why he's on this quest, what he's actually fighting for, and what it means to not just him but everyone.
Have you found the secret that I have lost?
Yes.
You and the land are one.
That to me, like both visually and also from a storytelling perspective, was some of the best stuff in this movie.
Yeah, like the fact he went on the quest not so much to find the Grail, but to understand the truth of its purpose.
Yeah,
and like I imagine if you use a Grail poorly, it either shatters like the Excalibur, or perhaps it turns you into the rapid aging mummy. That's the strength of the movie. The fact that the third, it took to Percival. Like Percival is the third stage of Merlin's experiment, where Arthur couldn't be the guy, but Arthur could inspire and train the guy to be the one that the land needs to ultimately heal them and bring them together. But his introduction was horseshit.
Take me with you. I want to be a knight.
I felt like that needed a little bit more time.
It did.
To even approach plausibility. But yeah, like so like that worked for you. But imagine if they had actually nailed the character of Percival and his introduction, and it wasn't just like, oh, here's a guy and here's this 45-second scene of him and Lancelot, and now he's going to be super important during the Grail quest like 30 minutes from now.
Yeah. It would have worked a lot better.
Same
if they
way
had
we said
more
if
time.
Liam Neeson had been like a bigger part of the plot, and maybe he was like Arthur's biggest booster, and this is like, it makes sense that there's like this big betrayal that they really make us feel like this is a betrayal rather than just telling us, you know. There's a couple points throughout the movie where I felt like, boy, this did feel like a 3-hour movie that got chopped down to 2 minutes 20.
No, I'm very much a person who likes a good character study, strong understanding of the motivations that then drive the plot forward.
Yeah.
That's not what you get with these type of legendary stories. You know, you get more surface level thematic sort of things, which I think I was more open to when I was a child and I was watching Star Wars.
Right.
And those things were enough. Now I need to really understand a character in order to invest in them. And you know, put myself in their situation.
Yeah.
That's kind of what I'm looking for out of film, and I don't get any of that in this movie.
Yeah.
Which is unfortunate. Although I don't think the movie is bad.
No.
I want to say that. I think it has its moments. It's for the time, for what it's going for, I think it mostly works. I think maybe they could have chose a different actor for Merlin,
or just give him better
written
direction.
Him, give him better direction. Maybe write him to not be quite so cheeky, that sort of thing.
I've seen great art. I've seen Marlon Brando off the fucking rails. Being a great actor doesn't mean anything if you don't have somebody that can like harness that and use it to, you know, to the great effect. What do you think of the end of this movie?
Arthur!
Imagine like in the end of Lord of the Rings when Sam and Frodo go up to the top of Mount Doom and they throw the ring in, and then Frodo's gone and Sam rides back to the Shire just in time to see him taking off across the sea to whatever Valinor or whatever the fuck the Middle Earth version of heaven. It'd feel like a giant non sequitur, right? And I felt like that. Like, unless you know what the hell is going on, oh, this is Arthur going to Avalon, which is essentially the Arthurian Legends version of Valhalla, to recover from his wounds and sleep, but he might return when Britain needs him. That is completely lost. And I'm like, Jesus, can we get To me, I think it would have been cool, like if old man Arthur, weary from the battle and wounded, is being, loaded on his boat. He needed a moment with Percival to explain that. Like Percival's like, my lord, why? Like I did what you want. Why are you leaving? And hey, it's your turn. I don't know. It's something.
I mean, I mostly got it. I guess I didn't understand. He could return at any time. They don't make that necessarily clear.
I mean, King Arthur throughout all these centuries have thought everything's cool.
Where the fuck are you?
Everything's cool. During the Battle of Britain, wasn't worried. Knew you guys had it. Knew you guys had Hitler the whole time.
He might come back on this Brexit thing though. he might.
Oh Jesus.
Yeah. So I guess I didn't get that part of it, but I did. I think maybe they could have done with something that told me that he was actually going to die this time, because last time he kind of survived for way longer than I expected, right? He's under some kind of spell or something for like 10 years or 20 years. He's under the spell forever. And I'm like, when is he going to die? Mm-hmm. Is he going to die? And I guess at the end of this, I didn't necessarily know if he was going to die, because he hadn't before.
That's where the legend kind of has a problem when you put it into real history, because like I was thinking, like, I'm a knight and I'm crusading for this grail, and the king says the only thing that can heal the realm is the grail. And 10 years later, the realm's still around, the king's still sitting on his throne. Maybe he's a little bit more dotted, but I'm like calling bullshit. I'm like, okay, maybe things aren't as great as they used to be, but I don't know. Maybe we can get some social programs going. Maybe we can help the peasants. Maybe we can. Maybe we don't need the grail. But you're supposed to. I mean, that's some of the things that drove me crazy. Like Battlestar is like they did shit like that too. Like instead of being like a reasonable time, like a dramatically reasonable amount of time, it was always like some crazy number. But it's the legend, right?
Yeah.
The fact that a knight would, by himself no less, quest and like that, and you see these guys like they're climbing the Himalayas in full plate armor, and they're freezing to death, and they're they essentially got a 2-minute montage, right? So they throw on the fact it's been 10-20 years just to really impress you.
Yeah, no, it's surprising to me that Percival doesn't check in at any point and be like, is the king still alive? Do we need to quest anymore?
Yeah.
It's been 8 years.
Maybe the king was just depressed and he's had some time to process it, and now he's like, he comes back and he doesn't have the grail, but the kingdom's great.
Yeah, how would he get word of that?
Arthur got remarried. Lancelot and Guinevere are serving at a convent together, and they're happy as clams. Like,
yeah, I know.
I tried to get a raven to you, bro. I'm sorry I didn't get you over the Himalayas, but
Arthurian legend doesn't give a shit about this.
I know.
It's not about that. It's not about the logistics. But it's about the themes.
That's the problem with the adaptation, though, is that I think modern audiences want those details to be sweat.
All right, we got to talk about Nipple Boy.
Okay.
Because every time Nipple Boy comes on screen, I feel like I need to take a shower.
It's so weird because they're clearly going for some kind of Caligula feeling.
or a cherub, or...
But honestly, I don't know what the big deal with Mordred is. Like, Arthur was a shit king at the time he came about, and he was brought about by some kind of weird blood magic the same way Arthur is. And he's like, I need to know Mordred's platform.
Yeah.
Before I say who I'm rooting for in this battle. But they show him up in this weird Caligula gold armor that's like, I guess if he was like real, like if they showed him torturing people or like impaling people or doing weird shit like that, it would have made sense. Or if Morgana was more of a dark sorcerer than kind of like a sexy sorcerer, then this would have made sense. But like having him traipse around in a gold armor just looked stupid, looked really dumb.
Yeah, I mean, it seemed to me like Morgana just has this revenge fantasy against Arthur for no real reason.
He killed her father. I mean, not he, but he is the... I can see how she transfers some rage to get revenge, or because, if she thinks the ball bounced a little bit differently, her dad might have been king, or at least a great lord instead of being dead. And like, also like, I see that's the thing. Like, I need to know what her relationship with her mother was like as a result of this. I need to know. And when she came back in the Arthur's court, that was like a 5-second scene. Like I thought that there needed to be some discussion about that, and maybe she needed to be, because she's supposed to, I've always got an opinion that she's kind of like a trickster as well. It's not that she's just a victim of circumstance, but she's also like very clever and cunning, and you kind of get a little of that in the way she tricks Merlin in the cave, but you don't really understand what the hell's going on there, so you can't appreciate her cleverness. And we never got to see her like affect some kind of like love or affection for Arthur, so it never really feels like a betrayal.
Right.
It just feels like a weird thing that happened.
Yeah, almost like a jealousy thing, like I wanted to be the only child, or I should have been the one who, was queen or something.
My father should have been the one united, and your father with his stupid magic sword and Merlin's interference. And I mean, it's all there. It's just they didn't bother to connect it.
Right. But then they tried to, through this Mordred kid who looks dirty, just looks dirty. I don't know how to describe it other than like this
he looks
boy
like
nipple suit he's wearing is disgusting. Both the body pieces and also the helmet. The helmet,
grotesque.
It really is, and I just can't even hardly stand to look at it. And it makes me wonder, like, is this armor magical? Is this something that is simply like a part of this magical being that is Mordred? Because it seems to grow with him. Like he turns from a child into a man, or I would say maybe a young teenager.
Oh, that's easy. They just used a breastplate stretcher. You know, you just
bring
like,
me the breastplate.
Yeah, anytime when he goes through puberty, he just used the stretcher a couple times, and you're good to go.
That's fair. But it does make me wonder: is it magical? And also, what a huge waste to make a full suit of armor for a child.
Right.
Holy shit! They're never actually going to use it, and they're going to grow out of it in like a year.
Well, I think there's something to that. Like the Morgana wastes a lot of her influence and magic on keeping her appearances and being beautiful, and like that's something that clearly was important to her for her son too. And he's very there's a couple things,
and when it's exposed to who she truly is, Mordred kills her.
Right, and that's like the monster she's created that only values vanity and beauty and surface things, and doesn't have any of the things that Merlin is trying to teach his progeny, his genetic manipulation projects. The other thing is, to your point, there's a line where Morgana strongly implies that he's got this special armor and that no living man may kill you or something like that. And I'm like, I wonder how that's good. But it doesn't matter. It doesn't really matter, I don't think.
No, Arthur does in fact kill him.
Yeah, with an assist from Lancelot.
Himself,
right. Maybe that's what it is. He does the. I mean, that's the first time I've ever seen that in the. Well, of course, I've seen it a bunch of times. It's in Lord of the Rings where the guy spitefully pulls the sword close to so he can get the kill shot in. That's what they did in Star Trek. Nemesis, right?
Oh, okay.
With Shinjin or whatever.
I've blocked that movie out. I hate that movie.
Anyway, this is the first time I've seen that, so maybe that's where the thing that Arthur was already a dead man, and that's why he was able to kill him. But I don't know. I felt like they could have done a better job with that, because that armor was supposed to be something. But that's the other thing is, like, once I found it very hard to tell the difference between the knights once they became part of the Round Table and they universally adopted that shiny armor, and then at the end it's like you're fighting shiny armor versus grimy armor.
Yeah, for sure. That's the only way to tell the
except for the
guys
golden boy
apart.
who, like, why would he like what in his character was suggested he would allow his knights to become grimy and gross like that?
Yeah, no, that's a good question.
You know, like his mother's obsessed with looks and glamour, and seems like he's being raised too, but his men are all a bunch of sloppy pigs. Yeah, that makes sense.
Wasting all of his time on personal appearance.
Maybe they all should have had like golden armor, something. But to tell
it was sometimes hard to tell gold from silver, though, because
really?
In some scenes, I thought at one point that Arthur was like riding, or one of the knights was riding Mordred's horse. Yeah, because I thought the horse had the gold armor. It was difficult to tell.
Overall, though, I think with some exceptions in like the actual sets, I thought the look of this film was pretty good. Like,
and other than
filmed on location,
muddy,
and you know, some of those things where you saw like knights fighting on horseback in rivers, I thought was pretty cool.
Yeah, some of those fight scenes, like, they're actually hitting each other. with heavy objects, and you can tell.
Yeah,
Like
Arthur
when
jumping
they're swinging
off,
a fucking sword and hitting their plate, they're actually hitting their plate with a heavy object.
Yeah. Or like when they've got those maces and they're just trying to concuss each other to death. It's pretty crazy. Or Arthur flying off at the top of a castle wall to drop the people's elbow on that warlord in the river is like, God damn, they really went for it. But as you said, also there was some weird things because, like, you know, a sword would hit a person's armor and clearly did not penetrate. And then like 5 seconds later, the FX guy would wake up and like, oh, I got to hit the button. And then like blood would start to kind of pump through the seeps. I'm like, you know, nowadays you'd just see the guy getting impaled through, you know, they just do it. They just do CGI and they'd have a little, the armor be rent and then blood would start pouring out. And I mean, shit, you've watched Game of Thrones. You know how it's done.
Yeah, it's tough to go back to this kind of stuff, honestly. Yeah. Our tech has gotten so much better.
I wish there was a way to still organically use like large crowds of people, because that's the thing I do miss. Like when we're watching Conan and you see some of those like cast 1,000 scenes, like CGI, there's a certain amount of lack of and I know that you can do it like you can make 100 people look like 1,000, and I think that's more. But like whenever anytime they generate just a mass crowd of people, like big sweeping shots of Kings, I always think it's fakier than when you actually just there at a location shooting a ton of people.
Yeah, no, I agree. And even some of the editing techniques, you know, I mentioned looks like it was edited on film.
Because it was.
It doesn't seem like they sweated those details either, because I look at Star Wars, which was also edited on film, and it shows George Lucas is a damn fine editor.
Well, and he also had like two other world-class editors helping him out too.
And you don't see those kinds of choppy edits. You don't see those missed frames, those kind of things. It is smooth, and this movie is not.
Yeah. I mean, it's so weird because it doesn't seem like... Because I thought for sure when we were watching this again, like there's probably a 3-hour cut of this floating around somewhere that has, you know, like the true vision of John Borman. It doesn't seem like it. Seems like he wrote a script that's 3 hours long, but he actually shot something that's roughly 2 hours and 20 minutes long. There's a minute long cut that's floated. Probably we actually saw it that was rated X for its day. And then the thing that actually got distributed was 30 seconds shorter. So it's weird because it feels like a movie that had 3 hours of film shot, and then the studio's like, "Are you fucking kidding me? You're gonna kill us. Rip 40 minutes of this out." But so yeah, I don't know why it's so herky jerky when it's essentially what was supposed to be shot.
Yeah.
But there you go. I don't know. You also can't, like, it's not as easy to fix, because it's so easy to fix stuff nowadays too. Yeah. Like if it cuts choppy, you can use all kinds of digital tools to like extend it or blur, like so many different things you couldn't do if you just had film. But you're right, that's something that's disappointing too.